Hello, welcome back to All For United WFC. We are really cooking on gas now with incomings. We won't talk about the outgoings, I should say, because at the time of recording this, obviously there's the news of Mary Earps and Arsenal. We won't talk about that. We'll talk about Miyazawa. I hope I've said that right. I've got Alex with me to talk all about this transfer and a style of player, attributes, work best position, all those kind of things that you come to expect with a player profile. So firstly, Alex, thanks for joining us. Hope you're doing well. First time on the channel, I believe, unless you've been on before.
Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah, thanks for having me on, Connor. It really is a pleasure, and a big hello to United fans far and wide. You know, this really is quite the coup. I can tell you now, there's quite a few people, well, more than quite a few people, Japan side, that are really excited about this move. I think it's the first Japanese player to cross over to the red side of Manchester since Shinji Kagawa, possibly. So yeah, a really big one, and looking forward to getting right into it.
I was going to say, that's a name I've not heard in a while. Shinji, I loved him as well over at United. I'll just start with your kind of initial thoughts then. What's your thoughts on the signing? You know, there was obviously a lot of talk that she might leave, obviously post-World Cup, obviously had a stellar World Cup with Japan. But just your thoughts on it. Did you think it was going to be United? Obviously, it kind of came out of nowhere. You know, Liverpool was the club that was always mentioned, and United seemed to have swooped in and got this one done.
No, yeah, I mean, I think it's there was no doubt that there was going to be a big name club coming in for her after the World Cup, after getting the Golden Boot and being such a standout performer for Japan all the way through, right through to the quarterfinals. And it was kind of just a question of which club would really kind of come in and do enough to get the deal done. Yeah, like you said, you know, there was a bit of, I don't want to say confusion, but there was quite a few clubs in there. Liverpool were the front runners at one point, and it seems as though United have just come in and hijacked it. Yeah, you'd have to think, you know, WSL, maybe United have a little bit more chance of getting through to the Champions League and that kind of thing. So I think this is about right. I'm sure we'll come on to the attributes and everything, but I think for Miyazawa, at 23 years old, first big move overseas, I think this would be a very, very welcome one.
Since they're still young as well, relatively, as you said, they're obviously, but we'll get into all of that actually when I come to those questions. But I'll just start off with kind of where you think her best position is then, because it's been, you know, some people obviously say midfielder, some people say forward. She's played a number of different positions from what I've seen in the Japan side. I mean, it's a very fluid team anyway, you know, with that Japan side. But where would you say her kind of best position is? And if she's coming into this United side, where do you think Skinner is kind of going to place her in and around this side?
Sure. Okay. So predominantly for both club and country, she would play the left side of a three-player attack. She's right-footed, so this would be kind of what we call like an inside forward or an inverted winger. On the left side, she can play centrally as a number 10. She can play on the right side. That would probably be the second most suitable position. Could play number 9, but I don't think we've seen too much of that. And she has also played number 8 as well. But I think given her technique, her ability to both pass and shoot, and her nous, you know, when entering that final third, her work in the final third, I would say probably the left side of attack would be the best position for Miyazawa.
So, I've got a number of questions now. If you're saying the left side of attack, obviously we've currently got Leah Galton there, who had probably her best season last season. Do you think she would have accepted United if she, obviously we don't know at the time of recording this, whether she's going to be a starter, whether she's going to be, you know, kind of rotating in, or what she's been promised in and around the squad. Do you think she would have accepted this if it is going to be a rotation role rather than a starter, or do you think that, you know, she is going to be coming in maybe to be pushing to start? Where do you kind of see that? I know obviously,
yeah.
Well,
it's interesting. It is interesting because so she's pretty much nailed on as a starter for the national team. In the past, she played for, well, she started out at Japan's most successful club, Tokyo Verdy Beleza, when she came from high school over there. Pretty much went into the same team. This is a team that had Yui Hasegawa, Risa Shimizu, who's at West Ham now, Japan's number 9, Mina Tanaka, quite a few stars at the time, and she really kind of cemented her position. From there, she moved up north to her current club, which is Mainabi Sendai, bit of a lesser ranked team. And one of my hunches is that she made that move to kind of keep her national team space secure, if you will. She has always, all the way throughout her career, played or had a very kind of important role in the national team. Very key role in the under-20 side that won the Women's World Cup back in 2018. So it is a bit curious to me. You know, I do think that Liverpool, she might have had a better chance of having a nailed-on position that would help keep her status in the national team as a starter for the Nadeshiko, would help keep that sealed. So I'm kind of, myself, I'm kind of intrigued as to what the plan might be, what she's been promised. Maybe Mark Skinner's kind of going to play her somewhere else. At club level, I should say that she doesn't always play as the, in this left side of attack or anyway along that front line. She has dropped down into the number 8 position because she can kind of do that rapid build-up play, that passing, incisive passing quite well. The game ahead of her, she can really spot the passing lanes, this kind of thing. So maybe there'll be a bit of a deeper position planned for her. Maybe Mark Skinner thinks that he can kind of work with her a little bit, retrain her a little bit. So maybe there'll be some of that going on. But I can't think that she would have made a decision if she wasn't going to be starting or having some kind of important role in the first team or getting enough game time to keep herself within that kind of first 11 of the Japan side in the running for that. So, yeah.
You mentioned a couple of her kind of attributes there. What would you kind of say her standout then? Obviously, we don't know, as you just said there, can play across the front line, maybe play in the midfield. I don't know whether that would be the case with the amount of midfielders we got, unless there's some outgoings that we don't. I've literally just, as we're recording this, United have just announced another outgoing. So I was just taking a look at that one there. But so whether there's another midfielder outgoing, but I imagine she's coming to play across the front line with Carolyn now, looking like that's not going to happen until January. But what would you kind of say her standout attributes? Obviously, we know she's a goal scorer. We've seen that from the World Cup, but club level maybe isn't as high as maybe some people would have thought. Obviously, if people are new to the game, see Golden Boot win a World Cup, they probably look to the club side and go, hang on a minute, those stats aren't as good as what I would have expected. But What would you say are her standout attributes?
Yeah. Sure. So this goal scoring and this goal rush in the World Cup, that's kind of new, to be honest. Being the person to apply the final touch and score the goals, that's never really been part of her. I don't say what hasn't been part of her game, but she hasn't really been known for that. The reason that she really came through in the World Cup was with kind of a reshape of the Japanese front line. Instead of playing with the traditional poaching number 9, they dropped the number 9 a little bit deeper, and then the two either side, one of them being the left side being Miyazawa, would push forward, and then they would be on the end of the chances. So, yeah, probably if we talk about the core skills, core attributes that have been with her all the way through the career, it's quite typical of most Japanese players who play in midfield. It's about that kind of quick, rapid build-up play, quite comfortable on the ball, very good movement in short areas of space, low center of gravity, this kind of thing. So they can really beat players like that. And just overall kind of like very, very good game reading. So she can really kind of read the game and figure out what the best passage of play would be, as well as the technique to play that killer pass when needed. So oftentimes, the stats haven't been there at club level. Just to kind of give a rundown as to why the current club where she's at, Mai Navi Sendai, a club in the north of Japan, a little bit of a lesser known club. They're a little bit outside the top 3 clubs that we have here in Japan. And basically it's because they're a very defensive team. They are they're knocking on the door of the top 3. They're trying to get in there. And the only way they can do that often is not by really kind of going out the way that the Japanese national side does and being all tiki-taka. They're a bit more reserved. So they don't create a lot of chances anyway. And she's been playing a lot deeper, as I mentioned before. So really, that kind of is why that she hasn't been involved in more of the goals at club level as she was at Japan, who do play a more front-footed approach, which she really did take to in this World Cup, which is interesting as well. That's kind of like a little bit of a rundown of why she has what her attributes are. One thing I'd add as well, talking about the WSL and the style of play, if we're going to kind of talk about maybe some of the concerns or the stuff that we haven't really seen from her, and it's kind of the defensive contributions, I'd say. So one of the kind of things that's got on my mind at the moment when we look about what would be the best league for Hinata Miyazawa, what kind of style of play suits her the best, I wouldn't necessarily put the WSL as the top one, purely because there's a physical element, and a lot of the players, they do need to have this kind of capability with defensive contributions, which we do see from the likes of Yui Hasegawa over at Manchester City, right? She can really get stuck in. She's good in recoveries, tackles. She can play. Well, she is playing as a number 6 there, right? We haven't seen that from Hinata Miyazawa, not yet, anyway. Doesn't mean that she doesn't have those attributes, but there's no evidence there to say that she can contribute in that way. So it's going to be interesting how she fits into the United side and how they really do use her attributes. Or is there something left to be uncovered that we haven't seen quite yet? That'll be very, very interesting moving forward.
I was going to say, you mentioned the kind of the WSL there and the difference. I think some fans, I guess, are a little bit skeptical because obviously doing it on the World Cup stage is one thing. Doing it in week in, week out in the league is obviously something completely different. What would you mentioned obviously the Japanese league as well. What is the kind of, I guess, key differences, similarities between the two leagues in terms of time to adapt and things like that? You mentioned that the WSL maybe wasn't the top on that list in terms of what currently suits her, but where would you say is the differences and similarities between the two leagues?
Well, the difference, it's kind of like with Japan, it's all about technique. right? It's all like kind of like free flowing, very fast passing movements and all this kind of thing. Where I think the WSL there's a little bit more or a lot more emphasis on physical attributes, and that I mean we say every time a Japanese player comes over to the WSL, oh, it's going to take a little bit of time to adapt. They're going to have to learn some of these physical attributes. There's going to be language barriers, this and that, and usually it doesn't really take players that long to adapt at all. We see them kind of fit in quite well. So yeah, it's kind of similarities. I'd say that they're both quite fast. So she's probably going to be used to it that way. But again, it's just going to be the physical elements that might take some time. There might have to be some work and training that would bring her up to speed in that regard.
If you can do anything like what Hasegawa's done for Man City, I'll be very happy with that one, because she's one of my favourite non-United players to watch in the WSL. So if she can replicate anything like that, I'm certainly all for it. What would you kind of say, I guess, the different expectations on it then? What kind of expectation do you think United fans should be putting on this sign? And obviously a lot of people, again, I mentioned obviously the Golden Boot from the World Cup. A lot of fans are looking at that. What kind of expectation level do you think fans should have of this signing?
Yeah, well, the first thing I would say is that, what happened at the World Cup, although it is very, very positive, and she really did play some of her best football there, I don't really, and we say this with every World Cup, it doesn't matter, if it's men's, women's World Cup, it's always whenever there's a signing off the back of a World Cup, these expectations come. But in reality, when we break it all up and we look at the games where she scored those goals, a lot of them were kind of on the counter, using her pace. Especially against Spain, which was really the big 4-0 win Japan had against Spain, really an anomaly of a game. And they probably won't repeat that. So I don't think it's so much the World Cup, the goal scoring side of it that fans should come to expect. I don't think she's going to come in and, I mean, I say this, but I'm happy to be proven wrong, of course. I don't think she's going to come in and start topping the goal scoring charts quickly. I think she's going to play more of a playmaking role. I would expect that any coach bringing in a player straight from Japan like this hasn't been overseas before, right? So the language barrier is there, the cultural barrier is there. I think that it's going to take a little bit of time for her to adapt and assimilate, both on the pitch and off the pitch. Probably, I would expect Mark Skinner to kind of drip her into the team. I might not start out as a starter, perhaps, as you've mentioned there. There's quite a bit of competition ahead of her. So it's going to take a little bit of time for this 23-year-old to kind of fully assimilate. And then from there, I mean, I don't know if there's kind of cup games, cup competitions where she'd be used a little bit more. It would be kind of like a gradual assimilation process would be my thought on that. So, yeah, like I say, this is not going to be a rampant goal scorer from the off, but definitely kind of like a future perspective, dynamic and creative talent that's on the books.
How highly rated is she then from a Japanese point of view? Obviously, there's a lot of talent in that Japanese squad. We saw it from the World Cup, obviously in particular, but also in the league as well. Obviously, and I mentioned Hasegawa there, obviously highly rated from a WSL point of view. How highly rated is she amongst that squad? As she said, obviously a bit of a surprise. We saw the goal scoring flurry that we did at the World Cup, but in amongst that squad and kind of I guess around her peers and so on, where does she kind of rank from that point of view? And just from Japanese fans, I guess, how highly rated is she in that squad?
Yeah, so from the domestic level, she's quite highly rated. The WE League, she's like I said, she started out at the most successful club, Tokyo Verdy Blazer. She went into that side at age 18 with competition like Yui Hasegawa, like Mina Tanaka, and a few other really good talent that was on the books at the time. Went straight in and kind of made an impact straight away. So she's known amongst the top sides, the top people in Japan, would rate her quite highly. Always been involved in the national team, so those in and around the national squad obviously trust her. They're obviously used to her being in and around the squad, but she does. I mean, yeah, the whole thing seems like a lot of what she's done so far has kind of gone under the radar, mainly because she's not directly involved in the goal scoring, more in the kind of less easy to understand kind of build up playmaking kind of stuff. So yeah, I mean, she clearly has the trust of her teammates at the Japan side, clearly has the trust of Futoshi Hikeda, the head coach of Japan. He keeps picking her. He picked her, gave her a chance at the under-20 level when they won the World Cup. So she's well respected, but a little bit running under the radar, flying under the radar. So I think on the global side, she's very new to the global scene, right? And the World Cup is kind of like springboarded that. So yeah, highly rated in Japan, but the world stage is yet to come to see the best, I think.
he's certainly going to be thrown into the spotlight when the Committee United, I think, when it comes to social media and just publicity in general, being in WSL as well, that is going to skyrocket. Obviously, post World Cup now, off the back of that, it's going to be even higher, especially if United obviously make it into the Champions League group stages as well. Could be interested on that one. My kind of last kind of question, I guess, on this, and I ask this on every kind of player profile, if you could rate this signing out of 10 from a player point of view, from a club point of view, where would you put this one?
Okay, I'd probably put this around 7 or 8. For the player side, I think there's quite a high chance, as you've mentioned, that she might not be involved in first team football as much as she could at other clubs. But definitely, I think if she goes out and this is her first club in the WSL or indeed overseas, she's going to have to put in a lot of work in training and things to adapt to the different styles of play, the physicality. She's going to have to add a few things to her game like that. So I think there's still a little bit of work to be done before Miyazawa becomes like a fully fledged player within the WSL. So I think, definitely around 7, maybe 8 kind of mark. For United to get a player like this, I think, if they're willing to kind of put in the effort and get the development done and give her the games now and again when needed and kind of incorporate her, drip her into the first team as a gradual process kind of thing, I think you really could have a very, very dynamic player on your hands, And we've seen it before. We've seen it before with players coming over from Japan to the WSL. We do have a few kind of concerns about the culture, about the physicality and all that kind of stuff, but more often than not, they definitely work. In fact, I can't think of a recent example of a Japanese player in the WSL that hasn't worked out right. So I think it's definitely a promising signing.
You got me thinking there, trying to think if I can think of one off the top of my head quickly. I can't think of one either. If you can't, I'm definitely not going to be able to think of one off the top of my head, that's for sure. Alex, thank you so much for joining us. If people want to follow you and kind of find your work, I know you do a lot, obviously, around the Japanese leagues and national side and so on. Where can people find any of your tweets or anything else that you want to shout out on that front?
Sure, yeah, okay. So on Twitter, I'm abishop32. You can find me there. There's a link to my link tree with all of the writings that I've done on the Japanese women's game, predominantly the Japanese women's game. I'm also writing for the Asian game. We are the largest kind of outlet focused entirely on Asian football. So it's not just the Japanese women's game or the women's game in Asia. It's also the men's game or anything that's going on in Asia. I'm quite prominent there as well. So you can find them at the Asian game. Myself, abishop32. So please drop me a line.
No, we certainly will. We'll probably get you back on during the season as well, just to see how this sign has, developed. When we get to January, we'll see how that one has developed. Obviously, make sure you're liking the video, subscribe, and if you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple or wherever you listen to your audio podcasts, make sure you drop us a follow and obviously leave us a 5-star rating as well. That would be lovely on that front. Make sure you're doing all that. We'll be back very soon with the next transfer one, so keep your eyes peeled. We'll see you in the next one.